Going to talk for a little bit about in this session. It's called presentation skills. I guess the thing that I'm going to say at the start is I'm not here to tell you about how to polish and really kind of produce a perfect presentation. What I'm here to do is talk about how to show up and be authentic in your presentation, and how showing up authentically can really help engage and bring people in. So you might notice me making mistakes. That's fine. I'm happy with that. You might notice that I have a bit of a black eye and I don't look perfect today. I'm going to tell you more about that later. You might notice, I don't know, all sorts of things. You might notice I don't have any slides, and that's part of my choice, but it's also about just me showing up and seeing what comes through. And really, this is what I've learned over the last few years, really over the last couple of years, about just showing up and talking and connecting with your audience. So that's what I'm going to be sharing today. Hopefully, my hope is that you will go away inspired to go and talk and show up authentically, feel brave enough to just show up and talk and be you and have your message out there without worrying so much about what's everyone else going to think and how are they going to judge me. So that's kind of what I want to be talking about. I am, just quick introduction, I am Emma Cowling. I am a leadership coach, and I'm also a Women in Games ambassador. I'll tell you a little bit more about my story in a minute. Because this is about presentation skills, I really want to put this out there as this is what it's all about. This is what I'm going through. I'm presenting on presentation skills. So I want to tell you about what's happening for me, and in the hope that that will help you also inspire you too. So I thought I'd do that from the start. So we're kicking off, and it's like, okay, that nervous moment when you press the live button and you press go, or when you step out on stage. And what's going on for me? Well, of course, I say of course, but I have that nerves in the bottom of my stomach. I had the butterflies, my heart rate's gone up, there's some adrenaline there. Even though I've been presenting for quite a long time, I still get nervous. And I think that's really important to recognize, is that those nerves, that adrenaline rush gives you a little bit of something, gives you a little bit of an edge, it gives you that extra energy, but it also can, if we allow it, it can dominate and it can take over. And so what's going on for me right now is that I know, and this is what I've learned through experience, I know that while that stuff is there, I can kind of park it in the background and just allow it. It's like an analogy someone uses, you can put it on a shelf. It's just there. It's always going to be there. It'll probably fade away as this goes on, as I get more into it. But I don't want to let it to influence what it is that I have to say. So I just thought, because I'm presenting on presentation skills, I'd share a real version of this. This is what's going on for me. The other thing I'm going to kind of draw attention to, God, so I used to hate it when I was younger at school. So I used to go bright red whenever I was in front of a room of people, or whenever the teacher picked on me, my face would just flush. And that's such a visible way of telling people that you're nervous. And so I used to make me stammer, and all of these sort of things came in. It used to really affect me. And now I'm kind of, and the great thing about video is you can see that that's what's going on. So I've got a lovely kind of flush coming on my neck. So what? I'm real, I'm human, and that's kind of, I've learned to just kind of get on with it. So I don't know if that resonates with any of you. Please do share. Please tell me if that's something that you get. And maybe there's someone out there who doesn't get nervous anymore, but I'd love to hear it. For me, I think it's just something I've accepted. It's never going to go away. But it does also help as well. It helps me kind of tune in and kind of give me that little bit of kick. So today, what I'm going to talk about, I've got a structure. This talk's sort of structured into three main sections. I've called it Be Visible, Be Vulnerable, Be Authentically You. So the first section, I'm going to be talking about visibility and share with you some presentation skills, some just a couple of tips around presenting that will hopefully help you. And then I'm going to talk about vulnerability and the fact that when we're visible, actually that makes us feel vulnerable. And so we get nervous. And I've just seen Florence, you're saying, my voice starts shaking when I get nervous. Pauline, yep, I blush like a tomato. Yeah, and I notice when I make a mistake, and doesn't that put you off? You make a stumble, and then you get caught up on the stumble, and then you stumble some more, and you're trapped in this kind of overwhelming kind of sense of, oh, and you just need to take a breath. That's it, and then it disappears. Sophie, voice starts shaking, and Emily saying stumbling as well, and Renata, yeah, used to hate speaking in public because it gets sweaty and gagging. But it doesn't happen as much because you've been speaking in public more often. And that is something that practice brings to you. It's definitely practice helps you see that actually it's not necessarily the practice getting rid of it. It's just the practice helping you see that it's not so serious. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about. It's the vulnerability. And then I'm going to be talking about being authentic and how showing up authentically really can help us engage with our audience more and to have impact and spread our word, spread our message. So that's the kind of the three sections I'm going to talk about. I would love to hear from you what it is that is encouraging you to share what comes up for you, share any questions. At the end of each section, I'll give a bit of time to look at the questions. So if there's anything that comes up in each area, then please do ask and we'll kind of address them as we go along. And hopefully it's going to be something that's, it's going to be something that's useful for you. And the thing that helps me make it more useful for you is for you interacting. So that's kind of really why I'm encouraging you to do that. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a background from me. I'm just going to, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background from me to start with, and I'm just going to be authentic here. I'm stumbling. I've forgotten what I was going to say. Okay. I've got some notes here, a couple of headline things. I'm just going to take a deep breath and go, right, where am I? I want to give you some background about me so you know where I'm coming from and why I'm here. I am a leadership coach, as I said, but if we go back 3 years, I was running an organization called Digital Creativity Labs, which was all about helping universities connect with the games industry and helping the games industry to connect in with research so that we could get research into games that would make them really stand out. So I kind of helped win funding for that and set that program up for about 4 years. And that's when my network with games really started to grow. I've always been in tech and I've been a software engineer, but I've never got into games until that. And I loved games. I love playing games, mostly mobile games, but I do really love kind of the things that games bring. Now, what happened was that I got to go along to a Women in Games conference, and because Women in Games were one of our partners. And so I went along 3 years ago and I sat there in the event and looked at the list of ambassadors, and I noticed that there weren't any ambassadors in Yorkshire. Now, I'm based in York, and so I thought, well, we should do something about that. I should persuade someone else to do it, shouldn't I? And then I kind of sat there and thought, do you know what? You should do it, Emma. It's up to you, isn't it? You've got to put yourself forward. So I put myself forward, became an ambassador, and then kind of went, oh, I don't know what to do. And it was about the same time that I actually quit my job and moved out of working in Digital Creativity Labs and started to set up myself as a sole trader and became a coach. So I actually moved out of the close links with the games industry, but I knew I wanted to remain connected with the games industry. So I decided that I would keep in the ambassador role and see how it evolved and see what I could contribute. So I did that. And that meant that I then turned up at the Women in Games event 2 years ago. And when I was sitting there in that one of the things, this is the point where I was trying to think, well, where do I focus my coaching career? What do I really want to help? Who do I want to work with? And I was sitting there listening to some amazing talks about games that had been developed by all-female teams. And it really got me thinking about, oh my God, these games are so different. They've got so many different new ideas that the games industry hasn't seen before. There's different mechanics coming through. There's different ways of presenting things. And it just made me expand out into my knowledge of tech and think, well, okay, what if your iPhone had been developed by an all-women team? What difference would it make? How would it be different? The functionality would be different, wouldn't it? Doesn't mean it would be any better. It might be better for us, but not so good for men, but who knows? But it just made me think about how much stuff in tech is being developed by all male teams trying to think about what women need. And so that got me realizing and thinking, well, what can I do to help contribute to this and to solving this problem? And the thing that came through was that in my coaching, the thing that came through was I realized that we needed more women leaders in tech and in games. We needed more people stepping up and speaking out and sharing their ideas and sharing their thoughts. And that's what, when I talk about leadership, I don't mean leading a team. I mean, what we want people to do is start being visible and feeling able to share what they believe in, what's important to them, even though the people around them might not really get it. So helping them to get that message out there. And so that's what I do now. That's my coaching area. I work with women in tech. About 50% of the people I work with are in games. And I help them to step up, see their resilience, be more authentic, be more willing to talk about what's important to them, and see the amazing things that happen. It's just, some amazing stuff, and I love it. I am just going to say, so I actually, there's only so much I can talk about in this presentation. And so if you want to connect with me beyond this, I share lots of stuff on LinkedIn about this. And I also have a Facebook group, which is a community where I kind of regularly go in and share masterclasses and things like that. If you want to connect on either of those, go to my profile. The link, the web link actually takes you to the Facebook group. So you can come and join us, and it's called Authentic Tech Leaders. Everyone is welcome, and it's a great kind of community that's building. So I guess the last thing I want to say before I go into the detail of this presentation is that I see my role as a Women in Games ambassador now as bringing my coaching skills and helping you to step up. So this isn't about my business, this is about my voluntary contribution. So if you want to reach out as a woman in games and want some support and need something around this, then please reach out. I am happy to help in whatever way I can. And I'd love to coach you as well, but hey. So let me talk now. I'm just going to check in on the polls. So hopefully you've had enough time to take a look at this. If you haven't responded to the polls yet, please do jump in and tell me what you think. So the first one I was going to look at is, what are your feelings about presenting? So the most people are saying, I'm okay with it, but I'd like tips to get better. And it's interesting that that's kind of what I suspected, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And that's probably where I've pitched this presentation. So that's really good, but I would have adapted it if we'd had some other responses. And please do share. Thanks, Sharon, for sharing my Twitter. Do you know what? I'm just going to quickly share the link to the group, because that is the absolute best way to get more from me, because it's a free group and everyone is welcome to join. So what I'm going to talk about is, how do we be more visible? Let's talk about visibility to start with, through presenting. What are the things that you need to do in order to present? And there's two core things to present well, two core things that I'm going to share, which whenever I'm coming up with a presentation that I think about. The first one is knowing your message. So in every communication that we have with other people, there is a reason for it. There is some kind of interaction and some reason for wanting to communicate with that person. And that can come from either we want to talk about and we want them to take some action, or it might just be that we want to brainstorm some ideas, even kind of coming together in an interaction to just come up with some new ideas. There is a reason for it. So when we're stepping up and we're presenting, there is also a reason. So stepping out and thinking about, what's your message? What do you want people to go away with, and what do you want them to know about? Off the back of whatever the time you've put into that presentation. That is the best starting point for your presentation. So things that you might want to think about, well, and actually let me just give you a couple of examples. So if you are speaking to a team, for example, and you are sharing with your team an update, which could be a presentation, then the thing that you might want them to go away with is a better understanding of what you've been doing, and you might want them to take some action by building on it. So that would be the aim of your presentation. Whereas if you're doing something like this, where you're talking to a group of people and you are sharing some ideas and sharing some skills, then what do I want you to be able to go away with? I would really love for you to go away feeling inspired to go and have a go at a presentation and just show up without too much worries and too many concerns, just showing up as you. I would love to inspire you to go off and do that. And we've been talking today about kind of running coffee breaks and running our own events. It's just having the confidence to go and do that and to do it in a way that it feels okay to fail and know that you can have an impact by doing it. So that's what I want to do. That's what the message that I want to get out there. So what can you do to think about your message? So for me, there are 3 tips, 3 questions that I tend to ask. One is what do you want people to know? So what's one thing that you would like them to go away with? Second question I always ask is, well, what action would I like them to take? What would I like them to do as a result of listening to me? And the third one is, how would I like them to feel? What's the feeling that I'd like them to go away with? And yeah, Sharon, what do you want people to know? That is, and that combination of those 3 things, when we kind of answer those questions, it might not be obvious, the answer to all of them might not be obvious, but that combination of those 3 questions is a really good way to just pull out, okay, what is it that I want as a result of this? So when we connect with that message, it puts us in a position to go out and start to frame and structure our presentation and start to think about, how am I going to achieve that over the period of time that we have? So Sharon's just sharing the 3 things that I've done there. So brilliant. It's lovely having someone in the background. Thank you. So that's the first thing. And when I went through those for me, the thing that actually came out as a phrase, and it doesn't have to be a phrase when you go into it, but it's really useful for me to refer back to, is when we show up authentically. I want to inspire you to connect with the message that when we show up authentically, we're more memorable, more visible, and we have more impact. So that's my message. That's the thing that came through for me. And so I really hope that is what comes through to you as off the back of this. So that's the first bit, know your message. The second bit, my second tip on presentations, is to understand your audience. So when you go into a presentation, you have a message that you want them to get, but they might be over here and you're here. So you've got to take them from there to there. And so somehow, but in order to do that, you've got to get to where they are and then take them on this little journey. So it's so important to understand your audience and what it is that what's happening in their world before you can get your message across. So I really like the analogy of the journey, because it kind of encourages us to get into their world and be patient with them, and to see that, okay, when you get into their world, there's an opportunity to just explore it a little bit and figure out, okay, how can I help them the most? How can I nudge them along this way to get the message that I'm trying to convey? So how might you do that? Well, so to start with, you want to, when you're coming up with your presentation, you want to spend some time thinking about, well, who's likely to be in the audience? Now, one of the common reasons for doing, I was trying to think of different reasons why people might be presenting. One of them might be a job interview. So how do you find out what it is that the people that you're presenting to, what their world is and what they know about? And of course, in a job interview, the message is probably, you want to employ me. But you've got to get into their world and see how you persuade them. So you can go and do some research. You often get told about who it is that's going to be in that interview, and you can go away and kind of dig down, find them on LinkedIn, do some stalking, find their company website, and just understand what it is that they are, their background is. If it is your team that you're presenting to, or people, colleagues within your organization, then there's a different route. You might go and have a chat with them in advance. You might just sound out a couple of them and say, what do you think about this? Where are you in relation to this? So you can understand the message that you want to get through to them. And it might be that, like we are today, there is no way of actually engaging with them. You don't know who's going to show up. So today I could have, I guess I know some Women in Games ambassadors on LinkedIn, so I could have gone and done some stalking there. And actually the Discord site is a great place to go and check and sort of see, well, what's going on and what people are asking about and what might be the challenges. So there's a couple of places for me to start. But actually, what do I know about you? And so what the things that I took into account were, number one, you are Women in Games ambassadors. Women in Games suggests that you are passionate about developing and growing more women into games. So it's important for me to share with you why I'm passionate about that too, so that you understand who I am and you can connect with me. So that's part of what's been built. That's why I shared my story in this, because I know that, you see, leadership coach, and I'm not working in the games industry. What does she know? So I knew that it was important for me to tell you about that. The other thing that was really important in this is the ambassadors bit. The ambassadors bit tells me that you have all stepped up and said, I want to do this. I am willing to put my head up and set my hand up and say, we need to make changes here. So that suggested to me that as ambassadors, as the group that we're going to turn up to this, are probably people who actually have done some presentations or are willing to do some presentations. You're probably not people who are scared of it. So that allowed me to pitch my message at that level. And then taking that into the next stage, as soon as we start to have the presentation, soon as I can ask you that question, and hence the poll, I could do a check-in and say, what are your feelings about presenting? And sure enough, 75% of people are saying, I'm okay with it, but I'd like some tips. And that's what I kind of expected, that the majority of people would do that. And for those that are saying I'm nervous, then I'm also going to be sharing some tips around that too. But it's just more tailored to those people for the deeper level of things. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight around what's going on and how I'm tailoring this presentation that can give you some additional stuff. So that's the first bit around how do you understand your audience. The second bit is then during the presentation. So as I said, at the beginning of the presentation, you can do a check-in. If you're physically there with people, you can ask a question and get people to put their hands up. But then it's an ongoing conversation. I am taking you on this journey. I'm taking you from where you are to try and help you understand stuff. And there are little different things that you're going to notice along the way. So I want to know if you're noticing them. That's why I'd love to hear in the chat, and I'd love to hear your questions about what is it that you're getting from this? Is it helping you? Are you getting some insight? Is it new stuff, or is it something that you know? And that helps me to see how to tailor things along the way. So I would love to know, and I'm going to go to Q&A around this section in a minute. Do you have any questions around presenting, around understanding your message, around connecting with your audience? If you do, drop them in the Q&A. Is there anything new that's kind of come out to you, or is there something that you know already that you agree with me on? Please do drop it in the chat, because that helps me know that where to take things next. And that helps me understand my audience. And while you're doing that, the one thing that I was just going to say as well is questions. So one of the things, and I don't know if I put this in the poll actually, one of the things that people get scared about when they're doing presentations is questions. Questions about, if someone's going to ask me something that actually I don't understand and I don't know the answer to, I'm going to look a fool. Actually, you don't need to know everything. And I now have grown to love questions, because questions give you the chance to understand where people are on the journey. They tell you what's important to them. So it allows you to tailor your presentation and adapt it in order to kind of make sure that they're getting the message that you're trying to tell them. So if you don't have questions, what could happen is you leave your audience behind. So that you leave them from, they're kind of here kind of looking around, and you're kind of over here going, but this is the message, this is the message. Actually, you've got to stay with them and you've got to walk with them. You can't run off ahead. So that's what questions allow you to do, is to stay with them and almost be patient. If you can't get the whole of your message across in that one presentation, then be okay with that, because if you run off, you'll never do it. So you've got to stay with them. It might be that there's a follow-up that you can do to help. And if they come up with a question that you can't answer, you're just going with this journey analogy. It's like you've gone down a little path and you can go and explore that path together. You might choose to go back to it after the presentation and have a conversation offline, but it's just knowing that you don't know the whole environment. You just explore, you just taking them along this one journey. So I'm hoping that that helps a little bit. So question here from Emily. How do you come up with a topic or idea for a presentation? I guess my thing is, in what context? I suppose in the context of women in games. Well, actually, I guess maybe I'd reverse. Let me just talk about, so if we reverse the order of knowing knowing what your message is and knowing your audience, actually the first thing you could do is go out and talk to your audience. Go out and find and kind of have a conversation with them. Go out and find out what's important to them. So if you want to work with an audience, and let's say you want to develop do a Women in Games event, then going and having that conversation and finding out what's important to them then can motivate you to identify, can then kind of give you hints about what that event might be. So that's kind of, yeah, so for Women in Games event, I've been in this situation, and that's one of the challenges I had, and why I didn't do much in my first year as an ambassador, is that I didn't really know what people wanted to talk about. And I think there's been some really great advice over the last kind of few sessions about just going along to events yourself. You don't going and seeing what other people are doing events on. And in doing that, you get to know people and you get to hear about, well, what are the challenges? What are people talking about? And that gives you a clue as to what you might share. A couple of things that I've heard today, there was a bit of a discussion about burnout. And that's something that I work with. So I'm thinking, oh, actually, maybe I could do a coffee break about burnout or imposter syndrome. And some of these things are like, oh yeah, I talk about that all the time. Why wouldn't I do that? But I just not really connected with that with the community. And that's what people might be struggling with. I don't know why, but it's funny how these things can come through. So listen out in these events. What are you talking to people about when you're networking with people? What comes up that you could both go, oh yeah, I struggle with that too. And then probably there's then a collaborative event that you could run together. Liz is saying she's in the wrong session. Go on. Lizzie, it's recorded. You've missed the first bit, and I've got to look at time actually. So yeah, we're about halfway through, but it will be recorded. And I've been talking about, to start with, just being visible. And just to summarize, and before I go into the second question, a couple of questions in here, I've just been being visible and how we need to know our message when we go into a presentation and understand our audience. So that's what I've been talking about mostly. They are my top two things that I go to every time when I'm doing a presentation. What is my message? What do I want people to know? And who are the audience? And oscillating between those two and kind of checking them out. So there's not necessarily an order. Might be that you think about your audience really first and then start to think about the message that they need to hear from you. So a couple more questions. I have a fear of finding myself, so Aisha, I think that's how you pronounce your name. I have a fear of finding myself rambling and the audience losing interest and getting bored of me. What are some general tips to keep my audience engaged? Definitely trying to get your audience to feedback to you is a really good way of doing that. So understanding kind of and encouraging them to feedback. So like I have been, so getting questions, creating space for people to ask questions, whether you're on a virtual event or you're running some sort of live thing, finding some way of saying to them, is this making sense? Put your hand up. All of those things can really help you to stay connected with your audience. And then the other thing is that if you know your message, as you're going along, keeping on checking in and saying, am I on message? Am I still sharing the important message? How am I doing for time? So I did a time check. Is that working? Am I still moving along? Is this working okay? So that's the way that I would kind of, the way that I stay on track. And you will ramble sometimes. Sometimes that's what just happens. I think I've actually been rambling a little bit here. But I don't know, did you notice? Did it feel like it? Your audience, if you connect with your audience and you understand your audience, they will be very forgiving. And sometimes we ramble off and it's an interesting bit that tells them a bit more about you and it keeps them engaged. So that's kind of what I'd say there. And Ariane says, how can we properly evaluate if we've done a good job with our presentation? That's a really good question. And I guess the thing that comes through to me there is kind of, what is it that good job means to you? And just checking in with that to start with. And sometimes I think what we put too much pressure on ourselves to do a perfect job. So for me coming to this, I would love all 19, 20 people in this session to go away feeling inspired, ready to really go for it. That's my hope. That's my real inspiration. I would love for you all to have my message. But actually, let me step back. That's a huge amount of pressure. That's kind of going to mess my brain up, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But if let's just step back. So if I could reach one of you, if I could inspire one of you to go away and do a presentation where you feel confident and you feel authentic, then that presentation could go on and connect with other people and help inspire other people. And there's a ripple effect that goes out from that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be that you reach everyone and that it works. It might just be that in your message somewhere, someone picks up on something. And it might not be in the event. It might be something that occurs after the event that they go, oh, that's what they were talking about. And so sometimes it's really, really difficult to get that feedback about, have I done any good or not? And I think almost that trying to hit a level of performance and that we think we should be going for can actually be really off-putting. So that's, I don't know if that's a useful answer, because that sort of says, well, don't measure it. But then the other thing that again, I'm going to come back to the audience bit. How do you know if you've done a good job? You go and talk to your audience. You see what comes afterwards. You have a chat with them, and the chances are that you'll get some people that did engage, some people that didn't engage, and some people that really, really were inspired. And that will give you some feedback on how to tailor. So that this is where, for me, from this, I would love for people to connect with me off the back of this so that we can continue the conversation. And that's, for me, is an initial bit of feedback for, okay, done okay. If you're talking to your team, if we go back to that, if you're talking to your team and you're presenting about that, then the feedback from being willing to just say to them, did you get my message? Did you understand what I was saying? Could I have done that better? That can give you a bit of feedback on how to improve. I guess in my answer here, what I'm thinking is that I'm not, it's not about doing it to be amazing, perfect. Measuring yourself against that can be really damaging. Measuring yourself against and saying, okay, what more have I got to learn? That can be a powerful thing. So checking in with yourself about, okay, what did I learn from that? What could I find out more about how I improve my my skills, my presentation skills? Hopefully that's the reason to get that feedback. So I'm hoping that's helped. Lizzie's just asking, I'm going to move on in a minute because otherwise I'm going to miss a couple of things. But like I say, I've got to be on the journey with you. So I have an interview presentation to do for 5 people who are really high level in the organization. How do I get over the terror of not knowing whether the message is right or not? Okay, actually, that's perfect to segue into the next section because I'm going to come back to that, Lizzie. So if I don't answer it, then just come and find me afterwards and let's talk on LinkedIn or whatever it is. But I think what I'm going to talk about is going to help you a bit with that. And that's to say, and terror doesn't help. But let me dig into that a little bit more. I'm just going to take a drink. So moving now into being vulnerable. So when we are visible, we are putting ourselves out there. We are being looked at, we are being judged, we are being, there's all these sorts of things that go on in our head about, whoa, what am I doing here? And that gets scary, and that leads to us feeling insecure. Now, this is a natural thing, because as humans, we don't want to be the one that can be kind of taken down by the tiger that's running after us, or whatever the analogy is, when we are safer as a crowd. And so being cast out, saying I disagree with you, and then being cast out makes us feel like, oh, now I'm on my own and I don't have the community support. So that's scary. But we don't get change unless we start to challenge. So if we don't start to kind of introduce new ideas and get willing to sort of challenge ideas, then what happens is that community just goes along with the base level of ideas that they all agree with. So there's a real kind of importance for us to step up and start challenging it, but knowing that it will feel vulnerable doing it. So let me just dig into a little bit on vulnerability, and this brings me to the next poll, which is what are you nervous about when you go into a presentation? So, and Lizzie, I'm wondering whether this is true for you. So one, messing it up and getting it wrong is kind of the big a couple of votes. The audience aren't interested or have heard it before is the most votes here. So that the audience don't get it. So I've talked a little bit about that, about understanding your audience, but there's when we're talking about vulnerability, what I'd like to encourage you to think about is, well, what's the worst that can happen if that happens? What's the worst that can happen if the audience don't get it? What's the worst that can happen if you mess it up? Now, the first thing I want to highlight here is the fact that all of these things are imaginary. So we are in a place where we are putting ourselves out there saying, hi, look at me. And then we kind of go, oh, and if I do that, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. They're all coulds. None of them are definitely going to happen. And while you are in that imaginary future, you are scaring the shit out of yourself. And while you're scaring the shit out of yourself, it takes you away from the presentation. It takes you away from what you're trying to deliver and distracts you from it. So it's not a very useful place to be. Now, we tell ourselves these stories that if we can just anticipate everything that could happen, then we can control it and we can make sure that it doesn't. But the reality is that most of the time, things don't happen the way we think they're going to happen. So even if we can anticipate it, even if we do anticipate it and put measures in place, something else could happen that we have to respond to anyway. We can't get everything there. So, and the pandemic is a great example of that nobody anticipated it. But we can see how resilient we are in coping with the unknown. And again, coming back to the pandemic, if we'd have been told 2 years ago that we were going to be locked down for however many months, depending on what country you're in, and that we wouldn't be able to we'd be stuck at home and we'd be working online, imagine all the anticipation, the preparation that would have gone into that. Imagine all the stuff that would happen, which probably half of it would have just been wasted effort because they wouldn't have got it right. And half of it would have been kind of disappeared off. And maybe you've got it right a little bit. But actually, we've been really resilient. We have responded, and we've responded to things as they've come up. Now, in a presentation, that's the same. So when you're thinking about, okay, I'm worried about messing it up and getting it wrong as a starting point. What if you do mess up and get it wrong? You can keep on going. You can keep on coming back to, are they getting the message? What is the message that I want to get across? Okay, maybe that's not quite working now. And do you know how many times I've just messed up what I've said in this presentation already? The number of, I drew your attention to it at one point where I said, oh, I've just kind of forgotten what I was going to say there. But messing up and getting it wrong doesn't mean you kind of fall in a heap and kind of disappear. Messing up and getting it wrong just usually means that you fluff it a little bit and then you take a deep breath, let it go, Connect with your message and go, right, okay, what do I want to say? That's okay. People, especially if you're connected with the audience, people are forgiving. Going on to the next thing, and forgetting what I want to say sort of fits in with that. The next thing, the audience not being interested or have heard it before. If you show up and you find that your audience have heard it before, as an example, then it might be that it's just that you have a really useful conversation about it. It might be that while they've heard it before, you're bringing a new spin to it because you're coming with your ideas on how to do this thing. So even if it's obvious to them, you'll probably find there are elements within there that they've just not thought of before because you're bringing yourself to it. And that's kind of the be authentically you bit that I'm going to bring in, that sometimes we can hear things over and over again. And then we hear it one more time. And it's like, I'd never thought about it that way before. Or I want to collaborate with them because they think the same thing. There's so many things that hearing it all before isn't a problem. The audience not being interested, yes, that's a challenge. But as I go back to the understanding your audience and talking to your audience and finding out and answering their questions, it might be that partway through your presentation, you go, do you know what? I'm going to throw this out and I'm just going to talk to you about what you want to hear. This is the topic that I've said. This is the message that I thought you wanted to hear, but let's have a conversation instead. And being open to that is really important. And the kind of damaging your reputation. So I just want to come round to this and kind of say, okay, so this is the stuff that goes through my head sometimes. And you might recognize this. I'd love to hear if you recognize this. What is it that happens when you think, oh, I'm going to mess it up? So I go from, okay, if I mess up this presentation, then I'll damage my reputation. And as a result of that damaged reputation, I'm going to lose my job. And then as a result of losing my job, nobody's ever going to want to employ me again. So I'm going to end up losing my house, losing everything else, and I'll end up homeless on the streets. Now, as I say that, as it's coming out of my mouth, that sounds silly. How do I get from each of those? But it's amazing how many times in our head that our worst case scenario is often, and I'll end up homeless, or I'll end up losing my job, or I'll end up doing this. And it's like way, way, way beyond what's actually possible from you messing up a presentation. So just recognizing that and noticing what's the worst case scenario if you do get it wrong, and seeing, yeah, Sophie got that. But it's, I think all of us, this is not just relevant for presentations, this is all of us see. It's so easy to go from, I made this one little mistake, to, oh my God, I'm homeless and on the streets and nobody's going to ever speak to me ever again. There are so many factors that can fit in along that way. And really, if you do a bad presentation and then you lose your job off the back of it, I don't think they're allowed to do that. There's got to be some other factors in there, and you've got to have some conversations with your boss, and you've got to have there's all sorts of elements that can come through. So you're not going to lose your job off doing a bad presentation. You might damage your reputation, but you can rebuild the reputation. And really, if people are judging you for going out there and making some mistakes, then do you really value their opinions anyway, if they're going to judge you that quickly? So that's kind of really going through and thinking through that, what's the level of impact, and seeing that actually it's not going to be that bad. And this is something that takes time to recognize and to build your confidence in sometimes, but it's trusting that you will be okay. And this is a really strong message in what I talk about in my group, with my clients, and it's what I really help them to see, which is that in every single moment, we are okay. We deal with the thing that is happening to us right now, and we are brilliant at dealing with that. We are so resilient, we are so resourceful, we are so creative when we are dealing with the thing that's happening to us right now. When I broke my leg and was in hospital for a month, I just step by step dealt with the thing that was happening. I dealt with the stuff that was coming through. When I kind of ended up with no money because I'd quit my job and gone solo just before lockdown, it was tough. But actually, do you know what? I just kind of went, oh, well, what can I do? Who could I reach out to? What can I? And it's amazing how many new things come to you when you are in that moment. So in each moment, you are okay. The bit where it gets scary is when you start making up the future. So if you find yourself scared, that's just an indication that you are making up what's going to happen. So that's really kind of one of the key bits of my message, that actually being vulnerable is scary, but you are hardwired as a human to be able to be vulnerable. You can do it. And when you are vulnerable, you will cope with whatever's thrown at you. There is nothing you can't cope with, because you'll just do it. And the thing when we're not okay, that's kind of the end. And that's a bit of a funny way of saying it, but do you know what? It's just the way of thinking about it. You will deal with everything that comes up. So that's kind of the bit I wanted to talk about being vulnerable. Now I'm going to come back to Liz's question. I have an interview presentation to do for 5 people at a really high level in the organization. How do I get over the terror of not knowing whether the message is right or not? So the terror is you creating an imaginary future. You are creating and I think I've just seen in the chat that you're talking about your dream job, not getting your dream job. So you've put a massive kind of wedge on, if I don't get this presentation right, then I'm not going to get my dream job. Now let's just step back from that. So do you have to get it perfect to get your dream job? If you could kind of connect with 1 or 2 people in that presentation, could that be enough? If it was, I guess the other thing I come back to is just taking the pressure off and going, okay, it sounds like your dream job, but if you don't get it, it's not your dream job. And that sounds quite harsh when I say it like that, but maybe that's not the job for you. Maybe the next one will come along. We never know what's going to bubble up, and we tend to put so much pressure on that one thing that then what happens is that when we go in, the nerves come up, we get flustered, we feel overwhelmed, we feel challenged, and the thinking dominates and takes us out of the game. So getting terrified about it doesn't help us. What we can do, and what I heard in the rest of your question is, okay, so how do I know the people in the organization? How do I get to know them and know what message they're trying to hear? And so that's a really simple kind of question. Just go, I don't know how you get to know them, but I'd sit with that question and ask yourself, well, how could you get to know them? Can you go and check them out on LinkedIn? Could you reach out to them and have a conversation with them in advance? Do you know anyone else who knows them that you can ask them about, well, what might they be looking for in this role? What are the things that's going on for them? But really what I'm saying is that taking the terror out of it means that you can get into the moment. And as you just said, taking each step at a time in the moment. You are where you are now. You have a presentation in so many days' time. What are the little steps you can take along the way to prepare yourself adequately for it without the terror? So hopefully that helps a little bit. Just going to check in on my time. Okay, so we're doing okay. Now, I think it's Wissam. It just says, I have to do an online trivia game in my company. How should I make things fun and interactive and not awkward? Wow. I guess by being fun and interactive. I don't know. Connecting with the people. So in your company, who is it? What's fun for them? Assuming that you work in a games company, I guess that means that they play games. So I guess that, and I'm guessing that there is some fun, but maybe could you kind of reach out to some people and who are going to be there, some people in your company, and find out what other fun things are going on? That's a really kind of difficult question, and maybe that's an offline. I'm going to go, if I go back to what I was saying about following the journey and working with people along the journey, I think that's a kind of a side shoot and a little pathway that we might want to go and explore together. So if you want to connect with me, I'm happy to have a chat with you about that to help you kind of guide you through. But I'm not sure, I don't know enough to be able to help you to guide you through that, except to say, go back to your audience. So you want it to be fun and interactive. And so what's fun and interactive for them? And go and do some research there. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about be vulnerable. And I was going to reference, actually, I don't know if, for anyone who's seen it, but it's well worth taking another look if you have, and if you haven't, go and check it out. Brené Brown talks about vulnerability and talks about the link between vulnerability and shame, and how when we're ashamed of stuff, we feel more vulnerable. But actually getting through that and putting ourselves out there allows us to be more authentic, and that's how we connect with people. And that's what then brings me on to this next session, is sort of saying, okay, so we're visible, we're vulnerable. Now let's take it a step further. Let's be authentic. Let's show up as us. Let's be and connect with people. Because it's when we're authentic, when we show up as us, that people really then resonate with us, and they are more forgiving. Our audience are more in tune with who we are. And so what do I mean by being authentic? What I mean is showing up and knowing your message, knowing what's important to you. So if I go back to the knowing the message of your presentation, I'd add in the and understand why it's important to you that they get it. Why is this relevant for you? What's the thing that you're really passionate about within this? And share that with your audience. Share your story, share why that's important, because that's how they understand you. And that's where they go, oh, you're human too. Oh, yeah, I get you. You're like me. And that's where the audience connects. They listen to us, and they're more likely to go along the journey with us. It's like we start to make friends. How many of your friends, if you think about it, that your friends, you will know them, you'll know what's going on in their life. And they're the people that you want to go along the journey with. They're the people who have the most influence with. Now, if you can kind of be more open in your presentations and share with people what's going on for you, then yeah, absolutely. Lizzie, I agree. Yeah, sharing anecdotes and experiences is as important as information. It helps, it's our story. It's what helps people see what it is that we're here for, and what difference we want to make in the world. Now, there's a caveat that I put in here. This isn't about sharing stuff for the sake of it. It's sharing stuff that is relevant to your message. So you don't turn up, like I could have turned up today and told you all sorts of things about what's going on in my family life. And you'd probably be sitting there going, what? Why is she doing that? And unless I could make that relevant to the topic of the conversation, you'd just think, well, okay, I don't really want to know. I think so many of us have people who overshare, and they kind of just splurt out all this stuff, and you just think, oh God, come on, I don't really need to know this stuff. So it's not about sharing everything that's going on in your life. It's about picking the things that are relevant and helping people understand who you are by doing that. So as a bit of an example, just checking off time, we've got about 5 minutes left. So if you've got any last questions, stick them in. I'm just going to share a couple of last examples while we go along the way. And as I said before, please do connect with me if you've got anything that you haven't asked in here. I could follow up, but I'm happy to continue this conversation. This is part of my role as Women in Games Ambassador, to help you all. So please do follow up. So the thing, my examples. So in this presentation, I've been talking about me presenting as an example. So I shared with you my story of becoming a Women in Games Ambassador, because it's relevant to, as I said, to you connecting with me and knowing why I'm here. I'm not just a leadership coach that's kind of been brought in to kind of deliver a presentation skills training. I'm here because I'm passionate about women in games. And it's important to me that you know that, but that hopefully helps you to connect with me. So that's an example. There's some of the other stories that I've shared that hopefully you found them relevant to help you understand the messages that I'm bringing through. And the final one that I was going to share is, I think I can't even remember if I said it now, but I have some funky black eyes, and they're actually faded a lot. But this is just me kind of sharing about being authentic. So a week and a half ago, I bashed my head on the door. My puppy was kind of throwing up, and I needed to get her out the door quickly, and managed to turn around and knock my head on the door frame as a result. Blossomed up and turned into two big black eyes, which have thankfully faded. But in my role as a coach, as kind of my, I do a lot on social media. I do a lot of videos. And my immediate thing was, well, okay, I can't do any more videos for the rest of this week. I can't show up. And then the thing kicked in and went, That's stupid, Emma. You talk about showing up authentically. So you've got to show up with this. You've got to talk about it. You've got to talk about what's going on. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll see the full story, and you'll see that I've used it to really illustrate how our bruises are the things that help people connect with us. So, okay, my bruise is visible and it's not a huge one. It wasn't a massive issue, but that bruising helped me to get out there and say, show up authentically. What does it matter what I look like, really, if my message is there? So that's kind of really the total of what I wanted to say. I have absolutely loved this. Thank you everyone for reacting so much and giving me feedback. I really hope that I have reached you and given you some useful stuff that gives you the confidence to go out and get presenting, get organising Women in Games events. And Lizzie, good luck in your interview. I'd love to know how it goes. My takeaway thing for this is, I guess I was going to say something different, but the big thing I would say is just remember that you don't need to be perfect, and take it one little step at a time. And if you can connect with that and know that just one little step at a time, showing up as you and what feels right for you, then you will make a difference. You will influence other people. It doesn't have to be everyone. It can just be one person, because that ripple effect can change the world. So hope you've enjoyed this, and yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and please do connect. I'm going to just stick the link back in here. So if you want to know more and want to really interact with me, then come and join me on Facebook. I share masterclasses, and we have kind of weekly themes. And I think I might do next week's theme around presentation skills. So it'll give you a chance to catch up as well. So and go deeper. So thank you very much. Brilliant. Yeah, amazing.